When we think of gladiators, we imagine strong men fighting lions, armored soldiers battling for glory, or slaves fighting for their freedom. But what if I told you that many gladiators were not grown men at all? They were children. Yes, Rome's obsession with blood and spectacle reached such dark depths that even children were forced into the deadly arenas. Some sold by their own desperate parents, some captured as prisoners, some simply discarded by society. In this episode, we uncover the lost and heartbreaking stories of the child gladiators of Rome, children trained to kill and trained to die. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is one of history's most disturbing secrets: the birth of child gladiators. Gladiator games in Rome weren't just entertainment. They were political tools. The rulers used these spectacles to keep people distracted, satisfied, and obedient. Give them bread, give them games, and the people would forget their struggles. But while the crowd roared, countless lives were sacrificed behind the scenes. Most gladiators were slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war. But historical records reveal another chilling truth: children were also used. So how did this begin? Many families in Rome were poor, barely surviving. For them, the choice was brutal: either starve together or sell one of their children to a gladiator school, known as a ludus. Imagine a parent's pain, handing their child over to strangers, hoping that maybe, just maybe, the boy would gain fame or bring back some money. But in reality, most of these children never saw freedom again. They were trapped in a world of violence, condemned before they even grew up. Rome's hunger for spectacle turned innocence into blood sport. You're 7 years old. Instead of learning letters or playing with toys, you're taken into a ludus, a gladiator school. But don't let the word school fool you. These were prisons, built not for learning, but for breaking human beings into fighters. The children lived in small, locked cells. The walls were high, the gates iron, escape impossible. Their days began before sunrise. They were fed special diets to bulk them up: barley, beans, porridge, sometimes bits of meat. Food designed not for health, but for muscle and endurance. Then came the training. Endless hours of swinging wooden swords, heavier than real ones, practicing thrusts, blocks, and fatal strikes. The wood bruised their hands, their arms ached, but stopping meant punishment. The doctors, the trainers, were ruthless. They carried whips, sticks, and rods. A mistake in combat form could earn a beating. And slowly, the children's innocence was beaten out of them. They learned to fight not for joy, not for honor, but for survival. To the Romans, this was not cruelty. This was entertainment being carefully prepared. Thrown into the arena, the day of the games arrived. The Colosseum and amphitheaters across Rome were filled with tens of thousands of spectators. The roar of the crowd echoed like thunder. And into this chaos walked children. Some were forced to fight in mock battles, dressed up in costumes, made to look like tiny soldiers or exotic warriors from foreign lands. The audience laughed, clapped, cheered at the sight. But for many others, the games were no joke. They were thrown against wild animals, wolves, boars, even lions. Or they were pitted against grown gladiators in so-called tests of skill. Of course, the outcome was almost always the same. The child fell. The Romans found it thrilling. The innocence of a child facing a beast was, to them, the perfect mix of horror and entertainment. But imagine it from the child's eyes. A boy, perhaps 10 years old, barely able to lift his sword, trembling as a gate opens and a lion charges forward. No child should ever have known that fear. But in Rome, thousands did. And the sand of the arenas was stained with their blood. The Roman elite and child gladiators. The use of child gladiators wasn't just about filling arenas. It was also about showing power. The Roman elite, senators, generals, even emperors, used these children as symbols of dominance. Take Emperor Domitian, for example. Historical accounts suggest that he staged games where children and dwarfs were forced to fight purely for his amusement. To the wealthy spectators, it was a joke, a cruel comedy. The sight of small bodies fighting, struggling, bleeding, was entertainment. The children were dressed in shiny armor, made to mimic adult gladiators. They were puppets in a cruel play. The audience laughed. The emperor was entertained. But for the children, this was no game. Every fight was a gamble with death. Every cheer from the crowd was a reminder that their lives were not their own. They were property, tools, disposable. And if they died, another child could always be bought. The forgotten graves. For centuries, these stories remained hidden. Rome did not want to record them, but the truth resurfaced through archaeology. In Ephesus, Turkey, archaeologists discovered a gladiator graveyard. Hundreds of skeletons were buried there. Among them were children. Their bones told the story that Rome erased. Skull fractures from blunt blows, broken ribs from heavy strikes, deep cuts from swords and spears. These were not the injuries of play. These were the scars of real combat. Children who should have been chasing butterflies, climbing trees, or playing games in the streets died instead in blood-soaked sand. No one recorded their names. No one wrote their stories. But their bones whispered the truth across 2,000 years. Why Rome erased their stories? Rome loved to glorify the gladiators. The brave men who fought and died with honor were celebrated, painted on walls, written about in books, remembered as heroes. But children? Children didn't fit the story Rome wanted to tell. A gladiator was supposed to embody strength, masculinity, courage. A child in chains did not inspire pride. It revealed Rome's cruelty, and so the children were erased. Their suffering was silenced, their existence almost forgotten. Almost. The Colosseum still stands today, one of the great wonders of the ancient world. Tourists visit it, marvel at its size, its history, its beauty. But hidden in its stones are the cries of children who never grew up. They were sold by their families, trained like animals, and killed for amusement. History remembers the gladiators as brave men who fought lions, soldiers who fought for honor. But today, we remember the forgotten child gladiators. Because behind every roar of the Colosseum, there was also the silent scream of a child. So I'll ask you, what shocks you more? That children were trained as gladiators, or that history almost erased them completely? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget, in our next episode, we'll travel to the east to uncover the princes of the Mughal Empire. Betrayal in blood.